Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I've been really looking forward to this one for the last couple of months. Today's topic is mastering personalization and data activation with Sitecore Personalise and CDP. So a little bit around us. My name is Mario. I'm the presenter for today's topic, and I'm also the co-founder here at Ratio, and we're a digital experience consultancy. We've worked with Sitecore now for many, many years. It's a product that we know very well, and we're really excited about running through what is not necessarily a new product in its legacy form in terms of when it was Box Ever, but it's a relatively new product. Now it's been rebranded as part of the Sitecore ecosystem, and it's probably quite a new product for many existing users of the Sitecore platform. Really excited to be joined by Ed Porter, who is joining us very kindly from Sitecore, and we'll be talking about a lot of stuff around the product, what we can do with it, and how clients can get the most out of this within a relatively short time span. So just to let everyone know, today's session is recorded. You get a recording, as people who've been to many of our sessions know, we keep these interactive. You get a copy of the recording in a few days' time. Plenty of time for Q&A. If you have a question, just pop this into the Zoom chat bar, and at the end of the session, we'll run through all the questions and we'll try and answer as many as we can. So cool. So before we get into sort of the nitty-gritty of the product, what it is, what you can do, just want to take a step back and look at some of the challenges which will hold you back if you've already invested in the platform or you're considering the CDP and Personalise options from Sitecore. Some of the things abstracted from technology, which we've seen in our experience, that hold customers back. And again, some of these are not universal to these tools. You could say these are universal challenges for any investment in enterprise level marketing technology. But one of the things we see specifically around platforms that are focused around capturing and use of customer data is data itself, is the fact that whether you are on today's call, someone who's already are a legacy Box Ever customer, or you recently invested in the CDP and Personalised product, or whether you're something you're considering. Some of the things which might prevent you or be a challenge when it comes to getting the most out of your investment is around that sort of sensory customer data overload. As most organizations, whether you're mid-sized or large, you will have multiple data stores. You'll have a ton load of customer data held in various different systems. You will have, whether you have small marketing teams or large marketing teams, there's always that constant challenge of data overload. Where is the customer data? Is it in a format that marketing teams can extract and build insights? So even from a basic sort of optimization perspective, is that data in a way that allows those marketing teams to extract it, analyze it, and identify opportunities for improving that customer experience? And it's even harder, really, I suppose, from a marketer's perspective, not only to extract data in a way that allows you to identify those opportunities, but it's even harder, really, if you wanted to inform the experience in the moment, as opposed to building out testing ideas for the future. And then, of course, it's even harder when it comes to the challenge of trying to track how your customers are engaging with you across multiple different channels. And that kind of feeds into something that Ed's going to talk about right now. I'm going to hand over to him, but it's just sort of as a preface. So we're talking about a lot of changes around deprecation of third-party cookies, and we talk about first-party cookies in a second. But something that we're seeing as a challenge and as a question that keeps coming up in consultancy meetings is around how we can build for the future once the third-party cookies are deprecated. And I know it's something that Ed is super knowledgeable about, and is going to just cover off in a little bit more detail.
Very generous with the super knowledgeable, but yeah, I think we're getting this question a lot from clients and listening to some of our agencies as well. We know it's coming. There seems to have been a bit of a delay, certainly over this side of the pond, but it is coming. And it raises a concern for a lot of our clients and prospects. People say, what can we do? And I think if you consider zero-party data, so things like what are people clicking on, where are people's mouses hovering, what content are they viewing, right the way through to someone filling out a form. That's all data that you can own, and there's so many things you can do with that data. So I'm really kind of trying to give people the insight to say, don't worry about it for now, even though it's coming. There's plenty of opportunity for personalization, even with the impending doom of the cookieless future. So yeah, nothing to worry about from our side.
I think this is a great opportunity. It's something we're feeding to why the CDP and personalized platform can be very powerful is around that strategy around leveraging the data that you own, the data that you control. And one of the recommendations we always say is, audit your existing data. What data do you currently capture? What data attributes are sat around that data? In other words, how deep a picture of our customers can we build via the data points that we're capturing? Where is that data held? What systems? And is it in a format which you as an organization can leverage and sort of build it into your ongoing digital optimization strategy and approach? And the other thing, which we see time and time again, and again, this is something which is not going to go away, and it's, I think, really interesting as part of the Sitecore journey, especially from the legacy XP platform right through to where they're going now with headless, sort of composable stack, is that invariably most organizations who are on today's call will have a relatively complex MarTech stack. You'll have multiple systems, best of breed products, which do something in very well in a very granular detail for a specific task. And one of the challenges that we see as an organizations who are really interested in trying to optimize those customer journeys is what tools are involved at what parts of the customer journey, and how do you connect those systems, and specifically with data, really, what's the glue that underlies all of those different systems. So one of the things we typically recommend is, audit your systems. What are they? What do you have in place? Not just in terms of the data you're capturing, but also in terms of capability. Sometimes reach out to your vendors, understand, what's the capability of the platform, what are we using versus what is underutilized, and again, use that to build that sort of picture of how we can build that optimization program. We're going to talk about in a second around a sort of customer experience definition, because it always feeds back to this idea that customers fundamentally engage with brands, not channels. And we still see a sort of common challenge with, especially large, complex businesses, is around, who owns the customer experience? Is there a single team or person who does? We still see, obviously, people own the web channel, email channel, app products, for example. And that's great. And it gives those teams the opportunity to optimize the experience within the channels they control. But ultimately, from a customer's perspective, it's irrelevant. Customers engage with every single touch point. The fact that each of those touch points may be powered by various marketing systems, the fact that data may not be passed through, I suppose, from their perspective is irrelevant. But from the client's point of view, you're putting yourself in their shoes. It's about trying to understand what is a friction-free experience. How do we build consistency of messaging throughout that journey?
I was just going to quickly add actually to that something I'm hearing is that you've got different silos within particular businesses. If you just go back to the previous slide, and there's different teams sending out different messages. So people are like, how can we be more consistent? Because it's quite difficult working within these silos. It's almost like they need kind of like a single version of the truth, whether someone's coming to the website, whether they're having an email sent out to them, to your point around omni-channel, whether they're calling up the call center, whether they're engaging with a chatbot. So I think it's, people nowadays we're moving towards kind of a frictionless experience where product owners are getting more involved within organizations. So I think it's really important that you have a hub that can almost be called in real time to keep it contextual for that individual in the moment, irrelevant of the department. So I think everyone's got to have a view and be selfish with the comms that they want to get out. So we try and help with that. Maybe we can touch on that later. Yeah, sorry to interrupt your flow, but I thought it was a useful point. Yeah.
I know. My pleasure. And then we talk about the definition of a great customer experience. And when we try to describe this, the definition of what is good, and the definition of what is good is different for every type of organization, depending on what you do. An insurance company versus a hospitality company, very different goals. But one of the things we always say is around trying to build the experience from the client's perspective and understanding that their journey does involve multiple channels. It involves deep research. It involves exploring different aspects of the digital ecosystem that they engage with, whether it's email channels, web, app, etc., and understand that their journey is not, I suppose, in the old-fashioned B2B sense, a linear customer funnel. It is topsy-turvy. They will come back maybe after a couple of months. Each customer has a different experience in terms of the way they research, the touch points they engage with. But the idea is around trying to understand what all of those touch points are, running an audit, understanding what are those moments of digital impact that a customer will have, the moment where they collide with your brand and do something, whether that is adding something to a basket, watching a video, reading a piece of content. It's just about understanding what are those moments of impact, especially as part of a non-linear journey. It's those moments which allow us to build that picture of a good experience and understand what is it that we need to do to push people to the next stage of that journey. And funnels are still super important for customers. If you look at e-commerce brands, it's still we as an organization, as a consultancy, spend an enormous amount of time creating funnels for discrete parts of e-commerce journeys, whether it's the checkout funnel, the pre-checkout funnel, the research stage. Funnels still are important, but the way they engage with you is non-linear, and it's about identifying the opportunities at those moments. And what we're going to talk about with the platform, beyond just looking at CDP and Personalise as A/B testing and personalization tool, when you start looking at the richer functionality within the platform, it's about how we can optimize those moments in the moment based on that data. And that's incredibly powerful and incredibly, I suppose, unusual, really, what we see with sort of enterprise level marketing platforms.
And I think just ties into this next slide, but everyone's had that experience where, I don't know, they might be looking to buy a pair of shoes as an example, and next thing you know, you go onto Facebook and the shoes are following you around everywhere. It's just a really simple step to say, well, actually, Mario went on to buy those shoes, suppress the marketing. So I think the content needs to be dynamic and people need to kind of jump in and out of cohorts in real time. That's the expectation I think we have as consumers now in our personal lives. It's interesting, actually, when we think about one-to-one, hyper-personalized kind of customer experience. I expect it. It's a bit like when you used to go to the greengrocers. I think you have a really personal relationship. So everybody knows, Mario, that you like those Hass avocados that are really nice and juicy in the summer. And if they come in, I think this individual would know that you want those, and he would also know what your kids are into. It could be that there's a nice crop of raspberries that have come in. And I think we lose that level of connection. We lose that relationship when we're online. It's quite lonely, to the point of where you don't even know what people are looking at. You might not know what's in season. I think with things like social proof that we can do as well, letting people know how many of those you sold, or how many people are looking at a certain product in the moment is quite interesting. But really, I like to think of it as humanizing the context of how people are experiencing the digital experience, whether they're on the website, whether they're on the app, whether they're getting an email. I think if you're on the phone to someone in a bank, let's say, as an example, they can pull up your account. They know you've got a credit card, a mortgage, you're not often using your overdraft, you've got a family, and maybe there's some intent there from something you might have looked at on the website. Wouldn't it be great for them to say, we can see that you're interested in pensions, why don't you pop in for a coffee and we can have a chat? But when you're on the website or on the app, you don't have that human being supporting that. So I think the great thing about platforms like ours and others is that we can kind of put all that information on a profile, so that, sorry to pick on you again, Mario, but when Mario comes on the site, in kind of under 200 milliseconds, a decision's been made to show Mario those avocados, or to show Mario that pension meeting, or whatever it needs to be. So I think ideally, when we talk about one-to-one experiences, I like to think of it as a greengrocer. Everybody remembers that kind of old school relationship. So that's what we're trying to do here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We was talking to a travel brand recently that specializes in active holidays, so ski trips, mountaineering, and one of the challenges is that it's a high value product. Customers have an in-depth research phase. It's a considered decision, and it's around how do we optimize the messaging for each of those returning visits. No one invariably people didn't necessarily go to the site on their first visit and then purchase a £2,000-3,000 ski holiday, but it was more around, okay, once they've gone through that research phase, how do we recognize them on the return visit in the moment? How do we present content that helps them in their decision making, gives them advice? One, they were, especially once they started looking at adding the product, trying to identify supporting auxiliaries. How does data support the upsell process? Once they've bought a holiday, sort of that post booking experience, how do you leverage data to make it not a experience where it's us spamming them with emails with additional offers, but about making it a considered experience tailored to them. How you map that out, and especially how you map that out in the context of a business that could be incredibly busy and fitting in things into their existing ways of working. So everyone wants to deliver more, and it's always a challenge we see, whether you're a small business or a large business, everyone always is crying out and saying we need more resources. But the ambition is there to try and deliver that experience improvement for customers, and it's trying to be realistic about what we can do now versus what I suppose we could do with trying to define that tailored concierge shopping experience for the future.
Absolutely. I think I actually put the crown on this slide, so you have to forgive my PowerPoint skills. But I think what's interesting with this example, and some people may have seen it before, but when we think about the traditional approach of segmentation, putting people in cohorts, think about some of those kind of traditional demographic information that we would take. These two individuals, I'm going to assume that most people on the webinar know who they are, but we've obviously got the King and then we've got Ozzy Osbourne. But they're both men. They're both born in the same year. They're both from the UK, happen to be married a couple of times, both lived in castles, and they're rich and famous. I think it's a prime example of, if you were targeting these two for clothing or even a new property, you could argue, an insurance product, whatever it would be, they're going to be very, very different in terms of what they would expect and how we would approach them, even from a channel perspective, right the way through to content. So I think this is why the zero party and the first party data that you're collecting is so important, because with all that rich kind of information you've got from the digital body language that they would give you, and you can even tie that into conversations you may have had as well. Having that all in one place means you can really get to kind of a true one-to-one, hyper-personalized kind of customer experience. But I think it's a good example of how some of those traditional approaches in the digital world are very different. So I think it's whilst it's amusing, it raises a very good point. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Mario.
Well, it's also, I think, reflect that it's a journey for customers. So we want to get to the point where we can do really, I think, accurate identification of customers based on needs. And I think it's about closing the gap between where you are now and how the system can be set up in a way that allows you to close that gap. And one of the things we're going to talk about later on is around channels and optimization. And I think just focusing on the web channel as an example. How do we, I suppose, if you're just invested in the platform, how do we turn it on? How do we set it up correctly? How do we assess that the data you're capturing is correct? Because I think one of the fear points around a platform like this will probably be around some of the advanced functionality that you'll talk about later on, around the automation, around the way it scales. You can almost lift up your hands and let it go. And I appreciate it's not quite as simple as that. It's a hell of a lot of work in terms of managing the platform and the system to make sure you get the most out of it. But it's also about, as a question we see from clients is they want to have the confidence and a way of testing and verifying that we are identifying the difference between a Prince Charles and, a nutter like Ozzy Osbourne. and then we can start talking a little bit about personalization as we get into the product. Be interesting to understand, for people on today's call, whether you've already invested in the platform, where you are on that journey. Are you sort of holdovers from the box every day? So you're advanced in terms of the use of the platform. Be really interested to see where people are. But one of the things which we hear time and time again is around personalization. Um, um, Beyond just the optimization capabilities of say something like Personalise. Optimization is something we live and breathe here at Ratio, something we know incredibly well. Spending all that time with clients, building out those backlogs of optimization ideas, what to test, why we're testing it, how we should test it, prioritizing quick wins versus sort of complex tests that require a ton load of development. But the interesting thing about personalization is the way, when it's implemented well, is the ability to almost take a step back from A/B testing and deliver almost like a mini A/B test at the individual level. And I think that's where it's incredibly powerful. And I know I'm stepping on your toes, Ed, on this slide, but one of the things that we've heard time and time again, and one of the clients we work with is a large global national bank. And when we started working with them, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, one of the things they said is, we're massive. We have so many different products. There's so much we could do in terms of personalization that actually it holds us back in terms of, we don't know what we could be doing. Well, we know what we could be doing. There's so much we could be doing. Where do we start? And I think that feeds into this slide, which obviously I've nicked from yourself and Sitecore, around sort of starting small, building that personalization program around perhaps a specific product, keeping it small. Don't look at multi-channel perhaps initially. Prove the value of personalization, especially in an e-commerce environment where you want to link whatever you do to revenue. And I know we're going to talk about that in a second. I know you've got a bunch of things to talk about as well.
That's fine. Yeah, thanks, Mario. I think the thing about the level of maturity within different organizations, it really varies. And I think a lot of organizations are quite surprised. We do a maturity assessment as well. Maybe I can send you the link, Mario, and you can send it out with the webinar. But I think people's eyes generally go to the upper right of this slide and want to get to one-to-one omni-channel. But the reality is most people are probably in the middle somewhere, and that's fine. The good news is there are kind of areas for improvement across the board with a platform like ours, and you can kind of start anywhere. But I think really it is about the journey and not the destination. There tends to be resistance from different departments. And I think it's a case of let's kind of almost take an approach of, the high value, low input use cases, and really make them tangible, associated to business outcomes. We'll talk about some of those later. But I think organizations can be a bit scared of, we're not ready for that, and our data's a mess. It's not a problem, and there's ways to simplify that. So yeah, in summary, it's about the journey, and we've worked with clients even at kind of the micro segmentation level, and in fact, I think to get the most value out of the gate, and I know you're going to talk about this, Mario, but there's been use cases set up from deployment to go live in kind of 6 to 8 weeks. Really starting just with the web and email. There's a ton of stuff you can do, and it can be very, very quick. So just keep in mind that not everyone's got to be like Amazon overnight. It takes time, and we can work with you and also with you, Mario, as well, with your clients. I think it's interesting when we look at the market. This is kind of a piece from Forrester, and I'm not going to turn this into a sales pitch, but I think CDPs, customer data platforms, have become a bit of a commodity. I think some of our kind of peers in the industry, some of the big software companies have kind of acquired in or built their own. What was really interesting though from Forrester is that they realized that a lot of these more traditional CDPs are great at kind of getting the data in, streaming the data in, but then when they wanted to think about enhancing experiences and doing the web optimization, they simply couldn't do it. We tend to go a step beyond that with decisioning, which I'll touch on later. But interestingly, with decisioning, Forrester found that people were getting a much higher return, a compound annual growth rate return, compared to some of the more traditional CDPs. So I just thought that was interesting. like I go back to your MarTech slide. There's a lot out there, and let's be honest, ours is not going to be for everyone, but it's definitely a consideration, I think, when people are analysing the market, for sure. Again, if you're going to think about going on a journey like this, you really need to tie it to business outcomes. It's got to be a value-based decision. It's not, you know, the colouring in department making things look pretty, which is quite interesting when you ask clients, what does personalisation mean to you? You get so many different answers. But I think across the entire life cycle of a new client to retaining an existing client, there's so many opportunities for personalization across the journey. I recently bought a new home, and right from kind of looking at where the plot, where they actually secured the plot, to reserving my house, to then actually choosing my options, things like the appliances and the flooring, right the way through to the snagging. Some of it at one point, I think we were still using clipboards and carbon copies. There's a ton of things they could have done differently to just really enhance that experience and actually update me along the way with videos and things like that. But right the way through, if you're thinking about kind of core KPIs, obviously the obvious one is kind of top line growth and conversions and all of that. But at the same time, if you think about customer satisfaction, if you think about customer lifetime value, if you think about even like an NPS score, these are massive things, and just moving those by a point or two makes quite an impact for a lot of organizations. So it's not always about some of those hard benefits. I think some of those softer business outcomes roll up to much harder outcomes. But the good news is, working with partners like Ratio, there's a real blueprint of how you can start and actually how you monetize those personalization use cases. Is it even worth doing it? There's probably organizations out there that are B2B that are very old school that are nowhere near ready. Whereas in other industries, I think there's a lot of opportunities. So I think it's great to have an exploratory session to determine, okay, where would we start? Why would we start there? What's the value? What teams are going to be impacted? Because nowadays, with personalization, to your point around who owns a customer experience, there's the social media team, there's the customer service team, there's the retention team, there's the sales team, the marketing team, the regulatory team. You've got to make sure you're sending stuff out that's compliant. And if someone's just gone through something in their personal life, you've got to consider that. So all in all, I think there's a massive area for business case. And a lot of our clients hadn't really considered all of those options. So it's worth digging in and having a look, for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things we always say is, and again, I mean, many organizations are super good at this, is around building that sort of robust measurement framework around that journey you want to measure, because it's, you know, the end goal, you know, increase, you know, sales on the site, conversions, etc., is one thing, but what are the micro steps that lead you to that? And I think that sort of that robust measurement framework that sits around that journey is super powerful. You might be an organization that we've started working with sort of a high-end travel company where, you know, an average holiday might be 30,000-40,000 US dollars. So it's a highly considered approach, but a decision from a customer. But what was interesting in terms of tracking the impact of sort of optimization and digital initiatives and the use of technology to drive those sales is sort of the disjointed nature between a lead conversion and a sell, managing different systems. Holidays are built, you know, bespoke afterwards. That data is held in a CRM system. You know, what are you optimizing against? Are you optimizing against a form conversion, or do you want to optimize against what's driving revenue? And that's sort of part of the challenge around integrating those back-end systems with that data, because ultimately, you know, you don't just want to stuff a funnel, you want to, you know, fill the business's coffers with revenue. And it's about optimizing against that end and using that measurement framework to support that whole journey. And which kind of feeds into this, really, is around, in terms of, you know, clients, and we always say this, whether you're you know, investigating CDP, you're an existing user, or you are using various other parts of the Sitecore platform, we always say, you know, it's not just about turning it on and using it. It's around about trying to identify what would be the commercial benefit from a digital program, a digital initiative. Keep it small, keep it time boxed, and understand, if we do something, what is it aligned to, and what will the potential outcome be. So if we were to spend, X amount of team hours over the next 90, days, for example, what would be the benefit in terms of, optimizing, web visits, increasing conversions, increasing the average order value. It almost doesn't matter really. It's around trying to put a number against it and using that as the benchmark to say whether an initiative works or doesn't. Because one of the things we've come to learn at Ratio is that all conversions can be increased. There are tests that win, tests that lose. It's almost like the old saying, you lost the battle, but you won the war. And in terms of optimization, you can always win the war and improve the overall conversion rate if you've structured it correctly.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, if I can, it is all about having a strategy, right? Where are you going ultimately as a business? How do you operationalize that strategy? You need to think about constantly deploying, testing, and having a culture of continuous experimentation with optimization. Once you've adopted that, I think that the tool is designed to help you measure it continuously, and you can put revenue associated with that. So that's built in. And I think really it's about those business outcomes. So making it easy to do that is key. I think a lot of the times, as I said, a lot of people don't know where to start. You've got all these ideas from all these different departments. It needs an organization like yours to come in and say, well, actually, we think you're going to have the most impact here and here. Why don't you start with a couple of use cases rather than going live with 45? So, yeah.
All right, let's jump into a little bit overview of the product, Ed.
Yeah, I'm not gonna spend loads of time on this. I'm probably not technical enough anyway, but happy to have a follow-up with the technical session. So ultimately, how does it work? Well, on the left-hand side, you're going to have your different systems. You're going to have the website, the app. You're going to have your operational systems. You might have stuff like from the call center. You're going to have order systems, transactions. Did someone buy a house? Did someone book a flight? Did they buy any ancillary products? Travel insurance. Did they rent a car? All of that information, all of the digital body language, the zero-party data, the first-party data, we take it in from everywhere and anywhere. And we've actually, to make it easy, when Mario at the beginning was talking about kind of the disjointed data silos, we've actually got a kind of a platform that enables you, because we've got connectors out of the box to almost connect to anything, whether it's through a batch feed, whether it's through real-time APIs. So once we've got all of those data into the CDP, we then can make a decision, right? And when we're making a decision, again, think back to the greengrocer, that logic of having a human being there, we can actually call out to third-party systems. So I'll give you an example. I don't know, if I was looking at a mortgage product in a bank, you could call out to Credit Expert or Experian or Dun & Bradstreet to determine in that moment, is my credit score good enough to even go through to that first phase? Because if I go through to that first phase and it leaves a negative impact on my credit report, you could have stopped it before that impacted my credit report. So there's a financial well-being element. We can call out to anything. We call out to inventory. If you're going to show Mario, I don't know, the latest Air Force Ones in gold, for example, he's a size 10. If you've not got them in stock or they're not available in the region, don't even bother showing him that. So the key point is we can call out to anything. At the same time, we know that a lot of organizations have got these guys with beards and check shirts writing these really, really clever decision models, if you like. And those algorithms, we can call them in real time if you like, but we can actually take the scores, the propensity to buy, propensity to churn, propensity to cross-sell, whatever it might be, and have that sat in the profile in the CDP. So then we've got all the data into the CDP from all these different sources. We've called out to a model. We've checked to see whether something's in stock or whether someone's suitable for the product. We then make a decision in that moment, at that particular time for Mario, we're going to show him those gold trainers. So you might have two variations of those, a really big image. You might just have a banner at the top of the screen. Or it could be that actually in real time, because of the CDP, we know that Mario at 8 o'clock in the morning is on the train on his way into London and he's probably on his phone. So we could send him a push to the app. Or later on in the evening, we know that he's home on his desktop. So actually, why would you not send him an email? Or actually, if he comes onto the browser, pop a piece of content on the side. And that's where you can play with the experimentation. And really, it can be across any channel you like. We work with airlines where they want us to personalize in the cabin. I work with banks that actually want to personalize at the ATM when someone's taking money out. So the channels really are endless, even in the store. So let's say, Mario, you were looking at those gold trainers, and I don't know where I got that from, by the way, and you went into a Nike store and you picked up, I don't know, some socks and a jersey or whatever it might be. When you get to the till and they identify you through your loyalty scheme or your credit card, whatever it might be, probably more likely to be loyalty scheme. They go, oh, just so you let you know, we've got a 25% discount on these trainers, you know, you're looking at. You'll probably, that's a bit freaky, but we've got them in stock. Would you be interested? And you make a decision. It doesn't have to stop there. We can, of course, create audiences and sync that out to social media. And I know you're going to talk about this later, Mario, but the channels are endless. Could it be a chat bot? Could it be sending something to the call center? And I'll give an example of that later. The website's really the obvious one, but right the way through to different apps that you might use. And even nowadays, getting really cool to things like Snapchat, WhatsApp, WeChat in Asia. So to summarize that, and it is a lot, we're taking data in from everywhere. We're holding it on a profile about the individual. When they're interacting with us, whether it's in a call center, on the website, on the app, we're making a decision. We're calling out to any models because actually your credit score might have changed, or you might have applied for a few extra loans, or those trainers might not be in stock. Before we show you anything in that moment, we're thinking dynamically about you on a one-to-one level, and then we're executing the experience. We're optimizing it across the channels that we know you're interested in and you're signed up to, because there's a consent element as well, considering GDPR. And then we're executing that, and then we're starting again, because ultimately it's about continuous optimization.
I find it interesting. It
Yeah.
reminds me of we worked with a consumer insurance company, and the client, who's the head of digital experience, once said that every time a client or potential customer clicks on an ad, there's an implicit promise in that ad that the subsequent digital journey needs to live up to, whether it's the imagery used, the tone of voice, the copy. It needs to be consistent throughout that journey, and not just that, on the returning visit. And that was her ambition: consistency of, there's a promise, we've said something, and we should make sure every touch point lives up to it. And then her challenge was how do you operationalize and industrialize that approach beyond the vision? And that was something which was, found incredibly hard, because different systems, A/B testing and optimization is great, but not to maintaining that sort of consistency in experience.
Yeah, I think as I said before, according to Forrester, it's a differentiator. We think it's a differentiator. I touched on it before. You've got clients interacting with you and prospects interacting with you in an omni-channel fashion, and they choose those journeys. What often happens, as I said before, is personalization or communication tends to happen in silos on the website, different email tools, different contact center tools, e-commerce, so on and so forth. And some of those out of the box have a level of personalization. So you've got these teams, departments, and silos beavering away in their own bubble. But ultimately, what we're seeing a lot of the time is one hand doesn't talk to the other hand and doesn't know what it's doing. And it leads to those disjointed experiences. One of our kind of clients in the States actually referred to our decisioning. One said the brain, another said a quarterback. So if you think about irrelevant of the channel, you're calling the personalization engine, the decisioning engine, to determine in that moment what is relevant to that individual. What do we know that they're into? What do we know that they're looking at right in the moment? And you're constantly keeping it consistent, as opposed to all these different departments working in silos. And it just improves the customer experience, and it does keep it consistent, irrelevant of whether you're on a plane, at an ATM, or on the website. So I would say decisioning is really, really important. And it kind of humanizes the context. Think about that greengrocer story. It's done with kind of business rules and logic. And from there, you're essentially trying to recreate that agent experience, or that face-to-face experience with the greengrocer. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a massive challenge, trying to humanize that experience, because most people look at something like Google Analytics as just sort of like faceless, like sheer war of million visitors, and without an understanding of the face behind each of those visitors. And I think that's a perennial challenge, really, is around getting down to the individual level, but in a way that a marketer can leverage and do something with. Sheer volume is useless unless you have a way of operationalizing the approach to delivering a better experience at individual level. If you can't, take a step back. But again, it's a journey. It's I think an investment in a platform like CDP is not to say like that earlier slide where you're on the far right, it's about understanding what are the baby steps we need to go along, or the hoops we need to jump through before we can start looking at sort of advanced experiences. And it's not to put people off the platform. It's about just being realistic about where you can drive the most immediate value versus where we want to get to in a year's time or 2 years' time.
Absolutely. And I kind of touched on this before, but I think it is about continuous optimization, whether you're an anonymous user coming onto the site for the first time or actually coming through very different channels, right the way through to you actually being retained or having a cross-sell or upsell opportunity. I think there's opportunities of personalization along the way. If you're going through a contract journey, if you're buying a new house, if you're making a considered purchase with a vehicle, if you're going on an expensive holiday, if someone's looking at something, they're probably going to be busy and they'll come back to it. If you make it easy for me every step of the way, do you know what? You're going off my books. And I actually expect that level of personalization today, to the point where so many times now I'll look at something on a website, when I come back, if they show me something completely different, completely irrelevant, it's noted. My bank the other day, for example, they when I log into the app, they're trying to offer me travel insurance. I can't go anywhere at the moment anyway because it's not half term, and they should know that. But at the same time, I've already got travel insurance with them, so it's just a simple check. If that was in the CDP, does Ed have a travel insurance product? Yes, he does. We'll try and sell him something else at least. But across the way, I think there's opportunity for personalization through all the stages. If you move to the next slide, please. I think being always on is key as well. Taking into consideration surveys, NPS, satisfaction, taking everything into consideration. What am I looking at right now on my app versus what I'm looking at on the website? We stitch all of that together to have this really rich profile. As you can see in this example, I've got a policy renewal coming up, but actually I've been playing around looking at a new car quote. So if I call up the call center, it'd be pretty cool if we could have that conversation. And at the same time, there's a low churn risk, so I'm happy. That's where we can start bringing in the data science and making it real. But we're really collecting insights all the time from all of the digital touch points, and then just keeping that on the profile, keeping it real and keeping it contextual. Next slide. I think by having access to some of these other systems helps massively. I think a lot of the time, if you think about the greengrocer, he's got the knowledge. If you think about the bank, if you think about booking a flight online, once you're in a logged in state or they've identified you, there's a ton of things that you can do. There's a ton of kind of optimization and personalization opportunities. So I think that by having access to all of that in a single profile, it even changes the way you do experimentation. It even changes the way we do A/B testing. If you think about the traditional way to do A/B testing, it tends to be split into cohorts and segments. This changes the game. You're doing it at a one-to-one level, and of course you can change that content, keep it contextual at an individual level, because obviously all of these attributes within my profile could change in the moment. So it's a really, really powerful way to keep it contextual at an individualized level. I touched on dynamic content as well, and I think dynamic segments is important. Let's say, let me think of an example. Let me think of an insurance example. Let's say I was, I don't know, looking at my driver score in my app, but then I had to put a claim in because I'd had a car accident. So I don't know, it could be a car insurer, it could be a health insurer, for example. If I broke my leg and I'm having treatment and I'm off work for 6 months, and you're about to send me an email about life insurance or something else, that's not appropriate. And I know for a fact that the regulator, the FCA, would have an issue with that. So if you can demonstrate at a granular level an element of transparency to the regulator, and this can be in many industries, to say, we know that this person was showing signs of vulnerability and we suppress marketing or offers or communication to that person because we recognize they were showing signs of vulnerability. I think that's great. And I think in this day and age where the example I gave of the shoes, how many times have you bought a pair of shoes and then got an offer the next day from the same company or an ad followed you around? It needs to be contextual. And again, having that decisioning at the heart of it, at that hub, the quarterback enables this kind of real-time context based on the cohorts, because you could jump in and out of those cohorts. So it's a very modern approach. And I think decisioning, again, that differentiation makes it easy. I think if we think about anonymous users, when someone comes on the site, there's a lot we can tell already. We can start tapping into that emotion. Okay, they're on an iPhone, they're using the Safari browser, it's the morning, they're based in London, they're looking at insurance, what particular insurance, have they played around with any quotes? So we can already start understanding that individual without knowing who they are. They've not identified themselves. So they may come back a day, a week, a month, 3 months later. But when they do, wouldn't it be cool if you showed them something they were looking at previously, or showed them something that's relevant to them based on what they looked at before? I think it's interesting actually with Gen AI. I think there's a lot of kind of chat GPT type use cases, but I don't know if someone is looking at maybe going hiking in the Himalayas. And we know it's a woman. You could actually position a blog that's suitable, but you've got to be so careful nowadays with things like copyright, and there's so many things that can go wrong. But what you can do, of course, just with the anonymous data, is you can be really, really smart without even knowing them. We're tracking that. We've already created a profile. You can determine how long you keep that for. But if you flick to the next slide, once that individual identifies themselves, we take that visitor profile and the known profile and we stitch it together across all the devices that we've got for that individual. We know it's a woman. We know that she's married. She's got a decent NPS score, very low churn risk, and that can be based on a survey. It could be based on some of those models that we talked about. We could call out to a model. But she's actually showing really high interest to buy a multi-car insurance product. Hasn't made a claim in ages. So actually, that's really cool. They're the kind of clients we want. We could make a decision in real time to actually call her. That'd be a bit freaky, wouldn't it? More sensibly, we could pop up a bit of content or a banner across the screen. Someone's been on the site 10 times in a day looking at this product. It could be that that's the threshold for our platform to say, pop up a live chat, because we know that's expensive. Pop up a chatbot, that's cheaper. So the personalization opportunity is much better when you know the individual, the channels that they like to interact with. All I can think about is you with the gold trainers now. But yeah, so I think the opportunity is far greater when you know about the individual, stitching it all together, and in the moment, banners or content or even an email being sent. I'm okay with that. If I'm on the website and someone sends me something that's relevant to me because they know that I'm probably busy just finished my coffee break or whatever, I'm more likely to click on that email to follow up on that offer later on. So final piece on this is, why leave it there? We can actually pass that information to your contact center system, whatever that might be. People think of the contact center as a real kind of cost center. You can turn it into a profit center just by taking a lot of that digital body language and insight that we collected in the CDP. And this example here, Jane, she's got an issue with a direct debit, no problem at all. It was just a glitch. Cool, thanks very much. Anything else? No. What that agent's got the ability to see, and he doesn't have to see all of it, actually. You could just have the next best offer. He's able to say, well, actually, just before you go, we wanted to actually make you an offer of the 20% discount on the multi-car product, which is great. She's thinking, oh, I've just been looking at that. How brilliant. I saw a banner. Or maybe you didn't notice it. So it really is kind of true omni-channel in the moment capability that you can do. And it doesn't need to stop there. You could, of course, send an email thereafter if they don't have to take the product there. So I think it's thinking about all of those channels and all the different ways we can get the information from the CDP into different channels, whether they're owned or third party.
I know you had a little bit on renewal notice, but let's cover that off in the use cases, just because I'm conscious of time. Just want to spend a little bit of time. One of the things that we hear from when we speak to a lot of Sitecore clients is around maximizing the investment in the platform. And we typically say you can, especially with something like CDP and Personalise, you can get immediate value within 3 months by focusing on time boxing it, focusing on some use cases. So we're going to come rattle through a bunch of typical use cases that we see. But in terms of yourselves, if you've invested in the platform, if you're looking at trying to show immediate value, reduce the scope. Reduce, certainly if you're a large complex organization, try and reduce the volume of stakeholders. We know that how easy it can be to allow inertia in a large project to take over. Initially, we just want to focus on driving revenue, proving the value of the platform and using that to build out, I suppose, business case for additional resources, and that could be in terms of money, but also could be in terms of just allowing your team to spend more time. So typical ones we always see is around, increasing campaign conversions. Most organizations do a load of campaigns. We're not going to go into extreme detail on all these. We could spend like a whole webinar running through these, but the typical ones we see, if you want to focus the platform, campaign conversions, increase average order value. We see this is a really interesting one. We see this with lots of the travel clients we work with, is around those sort of auxiliaries. If you're a e-commerce vendor, how do you identify the next best product? How do you identify supporting products? How do you identify when's the best point to identify and feed that in? I think that's a great program to deploy with Personalise, because it's super measurable. You can build, you probably have the components already built in. You can start looking at more complex experiences where you combine web to email journey. So then the post-purchasing experience can be super tailored based on web data around, are they looking at any sort of additional products or services? Let's feed that into, say, email. Let's feed that into the content that pops up on the screen. Paid media optimization is something we spend a load of time talking to the clients, especially clients who have quite large media spend. A lot of the time, it's optimized onto the specific landing page, doesn't take into account the ongoing customer journey. It's not looking at sort of returning visits. It's not looking at how we can, if you're in an environment where budgets are being cut for media spend, and you're looking to achieve the same level or increase the level. I think something around a paid media optimization campaign where we look at the data we're capturing in CDP as part of those acquisition channels, paid acquisition channels, and then looking at how we can drive value over time. So, not just in the moment, not just the landing page, the ongoing experience. And when they return, let's acknowledge what campaigns they came from, what drove them to the site, what was their original interest, and let's tailor the experience around that. And I think that creates, within a marketer's mind, a load of ideas when they're sitting there in a room and a whiteboard trying to come up with stuff. And the one I brushed over earlier is around customer churn prevention. And I know you was going to talk about this, and then I stole your thunder again.
It's fine. I'll be really, really quick. So I think just to get your head around an example that all of us are probably used to, let's say you've got an insurance renewal coming up. You're probably going to go on a comparison website, you fill out a quote, you're then presented with the best three. You click through, and in this example, let's say you're the insurer, they come through to your website. The moment Roz in this example comes through, we know it's Roz because we recognize her IP address and all of that stuff. And actually, she's filled out her email address, and there's been an identifier. So actually, in that moment, it says box ever here. This is an old example, but it's the same platform. So in that moment, Sitecore recognizes that it's Roz. And in that moment, we can tell that she's in a renewal window. And we think, what's she up to then? So actually, we call out to the platform in real time, and we determine actually she's a good customer, she's not made a claim, she's got good NPS score, and actually she's got a decent customer lifetime value score. So the next best action is to keep this individual at all costs. If it was a bad customer, you just let them do what they wanted to do. So actually, in real time, when I say real time, under 200 milliseconds, boom, there's a banner that's shown on the website. 10% discount based on your customer lifetime value with us. So she gets the content, and actually in real time she gets an email sent to her. She's busy, so she leaves it, and the email is exactly the same as what she saw on the website. She still hasn't made a decision, but she realizes that actually this organization does care about me and they want to retain my business. She may not make a decision then, but later on, if she comes back through the app or even a chatbot, she would be presented with the same offer again. You might even pass that segment of the top 10% of good client, the good business that you want to keep, pass it to the call center for an outbound campaign as well. So very, very quick example. There's loads going on. They're recognizing who it is, checking to see if you want to keep the business because it's good business, then going after that customer or prospect, and making sure that you retain them at all costs across different channels.
You read the last one, abandoned cart reactivation, looking at the types of emails you perhaps be sending, looking at testing the time. I mean, as a tightly defined program, it's something which you can focus your efforts and ideation around. And that kind of brings us to the end. We've got a couple of minutes, so I think we've got a couple of minutes we can squeeze in a few questions. I think just a couple, Ed. One of the, we had this a couple of times this week. XM Cloud, so personalization within there versus what we at the moment.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think as a business, people kind of think they want to go down this route, they have to take this product. Well, actually, there's personalization built in XP, which is kind of our signature heritage platform. Within XM Cloud, it's absolutely built in. There's a level of basic personalization. It's designed for the marketeers. It's drag and droppable. I don't even know if that's a word, but yeah, it's absolutely available, and it's really, really easy to use. I think if you wanted to do some of the more advanced personalization, you need a platform like Personalise and CDP. But absolutely, personalization is available in XM Cloud.
I think one last one. It's quite topical at the moment around Google Optimize, Maximizer, which I was surprised once it was a leader in the sector being sunsetted. Sort of your views on that.
Yeah, I've had a few clients actually call me up about this who don't have the Sitecore personalization platform. Look, I think you said earlier that there's a ton of stuff out there in the MarTech space. It is surprising to see these products go, especially Google Optimize. I worked at Oracle as well, so I remember the Maximizer solution. As I said before, I think a lot of people were using these for very basic types of A/B testing. Of course, we've got that within Personalise. We've got that to some extent within XP and within some of our other products that I mentioned. So yeah, we'd welcome a conversation to understand what it is people are trying to do. I'd rather have a conversation around business value and some of those kind of core outcomes that we talked about and go from there. But our approach is definitely kind of more modern with our approach. I think being backed by the CDP and being backed by decisioning, it's a very different approach to some of those legacy platforms. So absolutely, we'd love to have a conversation with anyone that's unfortunately having to move away from those. Yeah, love to help.
Well, I think that actually brings us to the end of today's session. I think we're out of time. Just want to say thank you very much, Ed, for today. Super interesting as usual. You know your product. And I just want to say thanks everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Today's session is recorded, and we look forward to see you on the next one in a month or two's time.
Cheers,
Have a nice
mate. Thank you.